Hello everybody, welcome to Mahia Reads. I am AJ Cerna.
And I am Kiersten Michelle.
And not only are we lovers and indulgencers of books, but we also partake in beverages such as this. We got a beer here.
I have the cozier drink. I have a nice chai rooibos tea.
Yeah. But not only that, as we mention in every video, we are fantasy authors. I'm a fantasy author, she's a fantasy author.
Everyone's a fantasy author.
Everyone's a fantasy author. I've been writing for 20 some odd years. I went to school for screenwriting. You could probably find a dub that I worked on many years ago as a writer, and an anime dub to be clear. So I've been writing in many different capacities for years, and as a result I have some opinions on writing advice that authors have given, and I'm sure you do as well. This was actually inspired by, this is an old quote, and not only old, a frequent quote by Stephen King with regards to notebooks. And he says that he thinks writers' notebooks is the best way to immortalize bad ideas. That was the quote. And your response was what, Kiersten, to that?
He clearly doesn't have ADHD.
Yeah, and the idea behind it is that over time, as your mind goes over it, the bad ideas will be sifted out.
And you'll remember any good idea. Any good idea you have, you will not forget, even if you don't write it down.
Which you don't think is true.
No.
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 Yeah. We're going to be reacting to specific pieces of writing advice or comments regarding the writing process from various different authors. And just to start things off, we'll even start off with another Stephen King quote. And it's not just writing process, but just writing in general. He says, "The road to hell is paved with adverbs." That's another one. By the way, these quotes I'm going to be getting are all from JerichoWriters.com if you want to check that out. So Kiersten, how do you feel about
I feel like J.K. Rowling would be highly offended. Highly offended, yeah. For those of you who have read the Harry Potter series, there's a lot of adverbs. I don't think she uses adverbs as much these days in her Cormoran Strike books. Yeah, I
know I'm like 3 books behind that, and I don't know if and when I intend to catch up between the massive size of those books and her recent foray into the transphobic world. It's one of those things where I'm like, I don't remember them being as bad in the most recent books.
No. I think overall I agree with it. That's like pretty solid writing advice. I think a lot of people, editing software, editors, you, it's like constantly when you're going back of like how many adverbs you put in that you're like, that's unnecessary.
Yeah, I think for me what it also has to do is it's finding a way to get your point across without just telling us. And I think adverbs are a way to just tell us rather than have the reader experience something specific about a character or a moment. I could see why that's there. Even though I look at that and I go, I don't know about that, I find myself frequently cutting adverbs. Yeah.
I feel like adverbs are one of those things that I use. If I'm going to use it, I want it to be very intentional. There's a reason I'm leaving this adverb in there.
Yeah, it's about looking at them and being intentional with them. They exist for a reason. They are a tool, but like every tool, you don't want to build an entire house with just a hammer. I don't know about building, but I'm assuming that holds true.
Maybe that's not true.
Maybe that's not true.
One of the commenters are going to be like, that's not true. You could totally build a house with a hammer.
That would be so cool. Someone says, let me prove this, that you could build an entire house with a hammer.
Prove to us that you can do that.
Without a saw. You just have to hammer off the wood pieces. Anyway, this other quote comes from Marcus Fabius Quintilianus. Have you ever heard of that name before? You're looking at me as if I should know who that is.
No.
Okay. Write quickly and you will never write well. Write well and you will soon write quickly. Hard disagree on that one. Because for me...
What does that even mean?
I think it means that you need to, instead of just churning out content, you need to be meditative about your writing process, and then over time you will get quicker. In my opinion, if you're able to write things quickly, you're able to get out a lot of your bad mistakes early on, as long as you do so with the thought to progress well. And I think if you're able to write quickly, you're able to make a lot of mistakes quickly. Now, granted, I think both are needed in order to actually progress. You need to write quickly, but then also take the time to learn to write effectively and write well. What do you think?
Because I'm like, write quickly, I guess it depends on what that means, but I think like first, especially for new writers, I feel like writing quickly is the better advice, because if you don't write quickly, you're never going to finish that story. You're going to keep going over that first chapter over and over again until it's perfect.
My God, how many people do that? Is write that first chapter. I've written my first chapter. I'm trying to think of how many stories. There's probably like 5 to 10 novels and screenplays each that I have just gotten a third of the way through and not finished.
Until you taught me how to outline.
Yeah.
That was my problem. And I tried to be perfect with my first draft, and now it's like my first drafts are illegible.
Just get through it, because the problem is if you just keep writing well and be like, I'm not going to finish this into this well, you won't get past a certain point because you're going to be stuck on a specific mentality. And you don't practice the latter half of the storytelling, which is also very important. Mr. Quintilianus, that's actually how it's spelled.
I know that's how it's spelled. I just don't know if that's how it's pronounced.
That I disrespectfully disagree. All right, next one is, don't tell me the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass. Oh, why are you looking at me like that, Kiersten?
I think that's just such a highbrowed way of saying show, don't tell.
Yeah.
That's just a really fancy way of saying show, don't tell, which I agree with.
Yeah, I agree with as well. You know me, I agree with that. There are a lot of times where working with people where it's like, they say, and I'm trying to remember specifically, I was in a writer's group one time, and there was this moment where they said a character was moved to tears, or she was moved to tears, and I'm like, I don't care, or I wasn't feeling it. She's like, but she was moved to tears. I'm like, but why? And also, how did that make her feel? So, how does being moved to tears make you feel? What does it bring inside of your body? Like, your heartbeat increases, you start to...
Your eyes burning.
Start to sob, your eyes burning. Like, those visceral things that we can then associate with those, I think, are more effective than just saying, she was moved to tears.
Or instead of just saying someone's angry, saying of having their face get hot, and their muscles clench, their jaw tighten, and they feel like screaming, and rather than just like, that person felt angry.
Yeah, yeah. I'm gonna skip a few here. Oh, this is a good one. Substitute damn every time you're inclined to write very. Your editor will delete it, and the writing will be just as it should be. So this is funny because I agree with this, but I use very so much. I have just been going through the editing process of my new novel, Spectral, and oh my God, the number of, not just varies, but filler words is ridiculous. And I'm able to, I just naturally, in my drafting form, just throw them out there as a way to, not to pad it, but just keep momentum going. And I think that's a part of it we have to accept is, in our initial drafting phase, we might just be inclined to do that, and that's okay as long as we catch them and get rid of them later when they're not necessary.
I feel like you're also writing very, at least for me too, I feel like I'm writing more naturally in just terms of how I feel, like, speak. And I say very and really in real life. And I write that. And then after I'm going through, I'm like, well, I don't need to actually say those things.
Yeah, or actually is another one. There are actually 4 actuallys in this paragraph. I have so many of those.
Finally is one of mine.
Is another one.
Or suddenly. Suddenly and finally, I say.
I don't do suddenly as often, but actually and very. But I agree with the idea that, but it's funny, so substitute damn. Every single time you want to do very, just type in damn and just be like, whew, yeah, that's a lot of damn. That's a lot of...
I just love that your editor would delete it. I'm like, what if he doesn't? And then it just has a really weird book.
Okay, this is a quote from William Faulkner, As I Lay Dying, the author of that American classic. Is he American? I don't know. Read everything. Trash, classics, good and bad, and see how they do it. Just like a carpenter who works as an apprentice and studies the master. Read. You'll absorb it, then write. If it's good, you'll find out. If it's not, throw it out of the window. And not only throw it out of the window, I feel like even the worst books, there's a lot of points where you're like, oh my God, this was a really good idea and I wish it was explored further. And it's good fodder for just things that you can incorporate into your own stories.
Yeah, or books that I don't like but other people love. And I'm like, I totally analyze books I don't like that other people love, trying to figure out why other people like them. What is it about the story? Because there are specific things that I don't like that I'm like, it's just very me that I don't like those. But it's not like a bad thing. But I love that. As bookworms, I think both.
We're inclined to. The thing is, I wish I could read faster, but I just simply cannot. If I read as much as you did, I would not be able to write a single word, ever. It's do as much as you can, but just don't let it get in the way of writing. If you are inclined to write, and that's a dream, that's something you really want to accomplish, just
And I like the
balance it
idea
out.
that you get to read whatever the heck you want. And it doesn't always have to be like, you don't have to read the classics and the best books, the top 100 books ever.
We
to
can
be
read
good
Ice
writers.
Planet Barbarians. We can definitely read that and enjoy it for what it is. I've never read it.
I don't know if we will enjoy that for what that is, but okay.
This is from, what's it say? George Orwell. Good writing is like a window pane. The idea behind that is
Like
you see
the
through
prose
it.
almost.
Well, you see through it. You don't really take in the
Notice it.
word. You don't notice the words. You just notice what they elicit. And I agree but disagree. Because for me, that's what my writing style I think is like. But I don't think it's the only way. I know you like flowery language when it sounds pretty, when there's like a rhythm to it.
Yeah, I was like, it depends. Not every book, but there are books that I read for the prose, in which case, yeah, I'm looking at a stained glass window.
Right. As opposed to a
clear window.
clear window.
Because yeah, this is how we lose the time more, and I'm trying to think of other books that I'm just like, the story's good, but the way it's written also is good, and there is something very like, it draws attention to itself, but in a good way.
In a good way?
Yeah.
Okay. But do you have any of these quotes that you maybe wanna pick out yourself?
Okay, let me see if I can find one. That's so mean.
What?
Good writing can be defined as having something to say and saying it well. When one has nothing to say, one should remain silent. Silence is always beautiful at such times.
This was from Edward Abbey. Edward Abbey?
Edward Abbey.
I don't know who you are, and there's a reason for that. You're an asshole. I think everyone has the right to say whatever they want to say things. So he can just...
And that also goes back to that whole, you're allowed to read books that don't have anything to say, that are just fun and lighthearted and get your mind off reality.
Yeah, Mr. Abbey, get out of here.
Like, sometimes I just want dragon fighting, okay?
Doesn't have to be about something. Granted, I want my books to mostly be about something. That's not...
You have less time to read.
I don't know.
I read enough books.
Oh,
like,
books that I'm writing.
oh yeah, no, that's fair.
I also have less time to write.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see here. I'm gonna move on a little bit to characters. This is about
there's
characters.
different
There's categories. Plot is no more than footprints left in the snow after your characters have run by on their way to incredible destinations. Now, I like that a lot because this is by Ray Bradbury, or from Ray Bradbury, because I was just watching Ahsoka.
Oh god.
And Ahsoka for me, and this is from the perspective of somebody who didn't watch the Clone Wars or Rebels, so you could take it all with a grain of salt, but it was very frustrating to watch because it just felt like pure plot and no character. And yet, almost nothing happened in that entire show. I think for me, it just felt like it was very much plot and mythology focused, not character focused, and that just made it drag out for me. So I really do think that character is important for driving plot. Otherwise, you just have Wikipedia moments just being written out on the page, and it's about the moments and not the actual characters, and it's not interesting to me. I don't know, do you have anything else to add to that?
I think you said that all.
Yeah.
But yes, character I think is important. I think this quote implies that plot is almost non-important. I don't know if I agree with that. But the characters drive the plot. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't let the plot drive your character. That's another thing, because when you have a story where the plot drives your character, it often just feels like it's...
You have a character that never makes choices and never does anything. They just keep having things happen to them. And that's very frustrating to read.
Yes, and not just frustrating, it's just boring as well. Yeah. Because it doesn't feel like they're driving anything. They're not making any choices. Yeah. So I like this one. Be a sadist. No matter how sweet and innocent your leading characters, make awful things happen to them in order that the reader may see what they are made of. I like that a lot.
You would like that.
Come on, I don't make my characters suffer that much, but I like to at least challenge them and put them through things to challenge who they are and to really force them to make decisions to drive things forward. Because, and I think it was George R.R. Martin where someone talked about something similar, how much he puts his characters through. And it's not called Jon Snow Has a Good Time. That's not the name of this. It's not about just seeing people have fun. It's about watching a really visceral and intriguing story play out.
Also, the whole point, what makes characters interesting and what makes a story good is the character having growth and change in the story. And people change when bad things happen to them. And they need to go through the trauma to get to the post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. You need your character to suffer for them to show the reader who they are, but also to show themselves what they're capable of and grow in that way.
Yeah, like the characters are like pieces of coal, and they need to be put under immense pressure in order to become diamonds at the end of the story.
Exactly.
I'm pretty sure it's a very original trademark.
See, Harry wouldn't be who he was without the Dursleys being horribly abusive.
There you go. There you go. Ooh, this is interesting. Fictional characters are made of words, not flesh. They do not have free will. They do not exercise volition. They are easily born and as easily killed off. Now, this is from John Banville. I almost said Bonneville. Banville. Now, that is a controversial quote. Now, I say this for a reason in that I see a lot of other writers who are like, oh, I don't make this decision. My characters are making the decision.
It happens.
I agree. It does happen. But at the same time, I do often scoff. I'm like, really? You couldn't change that? You couldn't just make some minor tweaks here and there that change the circumstances that allow the characters to shift their circumstances into different ways? Yes, I agree to some extent. That is true. But at the same time, you are the author. You can do whatever you want with the characters. They do not control their own destinies.
You don't know my characters.
I don't know your characters. I know some of them.
They're in my head.
I know. What do you think of that?
I'm trying to figure out what he's saying with that. Of just,
I think he's frustrated by other writers saying, oh, I'm only documenting what my characters are going through.
I'm also wondering because they're easily born and easily killed off. If it's just don't get attached to your characters because they are there to drive the story forward. So if you have to kill them, get over it. I
think there's also the other side of the coin, the negative side of that column. Like I talked about being a little bit in favor of that column. But the other side is they can be chess pieces to a point where they're not even interesting to watch or to read.
That's the thing is, like, I want my characters to feel like they have volition, they have free will, even if technically they don't. I don't know. I have mixed feelings on that quote.
Here's another great Kurt Vonnegut quote. When I used to teach creative writing, I would tell students to make their characters want something right away. 1,000,000% agree.
What they want versus what they need.
Not just what they want versus what they need, but yes, that's also a huge thing. That just brings, that's a whole discussion about character arc. But what they want in general is, if you have a whole section of the book, or even just the beginning of the book, where characters don't want anything, then they're just treading water. Nothing is happening. The story isn't being driven towards any particular end. Can you imagine a cartoon? Imagine a Looney Tunes cartoon. Every single cartoon, it's character, desire. And every single thing, bless you, is them trying to get to that thing. At its most basic form, that is storytelling. And when you pull that away,
hunting rabbits.
And when you pull that away, you pull out a direction for a story. And it just makes it not engaging to watch most of the time. I'm sure there's some instances where it's, just fun to watch. But most of the time when you watch a story, you're driven by a desire to see that character succeed.
Because it goes back to, you want your character making decisions. And in order to make decisions, they have to have a want. Because otherwise they're just making decisions randomly, and that's really not making decisions at that point. An author must learn the principles of good storytelling only in order to write better from the heart. Yuri Shulevitz.
That seems right. I'm not sure if it's Yuri. It might be Uri. Or Uri. I don't know. Apologies to Shulevitz.
Uri. Yeah, I like that because I feel, especially as someone who came into writing from a very just like, this was my passion after years and years of reading. And then always wanting to be a storyteller, but never quite being able to break through from writing short stories and chapters and then never finishing them. Learning the principles of storytelling has been a game changer. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if I appreciated that until you taught me.
Oh, thank you. But yeah, I think it is about, because we can understand the types of stories that we like, but when we actually learn how those slot into the grand scheme of storytelling principles, it's, oh, you're all of a sudden seeing the strings from the sky that puppet the story. And for some people, I know there's some people like, oh, that ruins the magic. For me, it just makes it all the more intriguing. You could see how specific things were pulled to make this happen. And you start to realize, oh, if I do this and this, and I'm able to write from the heart to make certain things happen, it makes it more effective. Yeah, I 100% agree. That is, yeah, for me, that I'm trying to remember the moment in my life where that changed. And it actually was relatively recently. Like I said before, I've been storytelling for 2 decades plus at this point. And even, I would say probably the last 5 years, 5 to 7 years have been the most crucial in learning about that. Most recently working on the Gin Tamer series and understanding specifically character arcs and how those can be utilized. And yeah, while I knew what character arcs were before, it wasn't until I was able to like really get enough practice in to see that in practice that I was able to more effectively create what I consider decent storytelling. Apparently I can't words. Anyways.
We good talking. I'm writing a first draft and reminding myself that I'm simply shoveling sand into a box so that later I can build build castles. Shannon Hale. Shannon Hale, I appreciate you.
That's my storytelling style. Like I am never one to be like, let me think about this for a long time and then get it out on paper so that it's perfect. Like I'm very much just, okay, here's a block. Chip, chip. It's still a block, but a little bit chip progress has been made, and basically just make rounds and rounds and rounds on it, and then eventually it is that, and that is effectively drafting.
And I feel like some people, if I perfect it, it'll be better or easier, but the way first drafting for me works is you go through the whole story, and that way when you're going through the second time to actually start really chipping down at the different character stuff, you have the whole story written. You know where it's ending, you know where it's going, and you can go and add these details that you didn't even think about until you wrote the whole story. It's so much easier to add those elements of foreshadowing or just understand the little character developments. This is where they're ending. How do I want to show where they start from? Yeah, I feel like you need all the sand in the box to figure that out.
It's so interesting to me, ironically, how I feel like a lot of people respect writers who just know things from the start. Oh, they knew from the very beginning that they were going to do this. And I'm like, that's a luxury. Come on. Or I know, this is the BS part, but whatever. I know in the MCU, people are like looking at Avengers Age of Ultron. Oh, they had that dream sequence that clearly foreshadowed. I'm like, no, it was a generic dream sequence that they could pretty much slot into anything to foreshadow generic bad things happening in the future. It wasn't that they actually knew, it was they can trick you into thinking that they knew. But still, at the end of the day, it was all about drafting. And of course, this is just that's how I work. It's a lot of how you work. There are different ways of telling stories. I think it's important to actually say that at some point in the video. But I also think a lot more people need to go through that drafting phase more than we give it credit for. And more that we romanticize. And
I think for someone who, I don't know, I consider myself a beginning writer still at this point in fiction, because my writing career up until now has been very academic. I think like knowing these things, knowing that my first draft is going to be terrible, takes the pressure off. Because right now I'm drafting 2 different books, and I've already gone back and been like, oh, I need to add more here. And I'll put little notes of margins of, oh shoot, I completely messed up that scene, I should go back and change that, and I'll just put a note there. And it's so nice to not be like, oh, I failed because my first draft's not going to be perfect and I'm going to have to add these scenes and change these chapters. No, that's the process. You're not a bad writer for having that process. You're normal.
Yeah, you're a normal human being. I think it's a lot of things. Is like I said, we romanticize these authors who seem to know everything from the get-go. And oh, if I don't know how everything is from the get-go, I can't even start. And I know a lot of times when I was learning early on about things where it felt like, oh, in order to write effectively, I need to know everything about the characters first. I need to know everything about the world first. And if I don't know that, then there's no point in even starting writing. Once again, everyone writes differently, but at the same time, we romanticize certain types of writers to the point where other people just think they're weird, and you're not weird. Everyone has their own process. And for me, it's a process that isn't completely like, oh, you can't do this until these things are done beforehand. It's not necessarily fair.
Yeah, I was like, I'm thinking of Shadow Weaver, and some of my favorite scenes in Shadow Weaver didn't come in until third draft. And even just some of the character development and how characters changed from the first writing to the final draft.
Yeah, and as someone even who is a heavy plotter, my most recent book, Spectral, there were really important things that only came along because I plotted it less than normal. How I normally plot a story is I plot an entire book and then I draft it based on that. With Spectral, I did the first, I think, 3 to 4 episodes, because it's 12 episodes long, 4 episodes, and then I just started because I really want to start. And that diverted everything and allowed me to go, oh, get a couple more episodes in, do more outlining there, good. And then I did the second half separately. But there are key parts where things just fell into place out of nowhere in a way that influenced the plot forward. And if I had done all of it at once, I may not have had that same experience. So it's like, I say one thing, but at the same time, it's not
I would also
set in
like you to
stone.
tell the audience so they can all judge you and laugh. How long are your outlines? How long was the outline for City of Mages? Do you remember?
Do you?
I think it was over 100 pages. I outline like a page per chapter. He outlines like 4 pages per chapter.
That's an exaggeration. You don't outline a page. I think you outline like a paragraph, but it kind of varies per chapter. I know there was one chapter where, what did I say?
Oh god. You said character fights someone and something happens.
So it kind of varies. But I think it also comes with working with a co-author. A lot of times we want to make sure that they have what they need in order to make sure things happen, and they can't fill in the blanks. They can't read your mind. I don't know why you can't read my mind.
I could not read his mind.
With how things end up, how I imagine things happening. So you have to have a longer outline as a result. Whereas my outline in Spectral was significantly shorter, it was a lot of very much structural. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. I just burped. Act 3. And that's pretty much how it goes. And I'm able to fill in those blanks and create things out of thin air and have it not be a huge problem. What?
Sounds like you're playing with the iPad.
Well, I was
while
going to
you're
say,
talking.
here goes another. That is it. Was there any other quotes, or is that it?
That was it.
That is it. We might revisit this topic at some point in the future. I know we're not necessarily a writing channel, but as writers, we do enjoy talking about writing quite a bit, and we want to hear what your thoughts are. What was your favorite quote that we discussed here, and do you agree with it or not? Let us know in the comments down below, and of course, give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed our discussion about these various quotes. But yeah, until next time, I'm AJ Cerna,
And I'm still Kiersten Michelle.
and we will see you all next time.